Hi,
Hi.
I'm Phil Schwartz, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. This is number 122 in my award-awaiting series, Magic History Moments. By the way, I have an acceptance speech ready.
We have for you your long-awaited award. Specially inscribed by yours truly.
Wow,
Allow me to read it.
please.
It says Phil Schwartz,
Is it spelled properly?
and it says, and we certainly hope we spelled it right,
There you go.
Magic History Lecturer of the 21st Century. With our many thanks, continued support, undying gratitude, and no money. IBM Ring 170 SAM Assembly 99. Ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Greg. Thanks very much.
And I surely hope we're still friends after this.
Of course we are. Wow,
That's your book of lectures right there.
wow, thank you very much.
You are
That's
most
very
welcome.
nice.
Thank you very much. You guys have to go out there. Thank you.
Okay, all right. I don't deserve this, but I have arthritis and I don't deserve that either. So, yeah. Jack Benny, I'd like to thank my phone for vibrating daily affirmations. No. Tonight, Houdini. Ever heard of him? On October 31st, 1926, Halloween, Houdini died. He was 52 years old. 100 years later, Houdini's name is well known, not just by us magicians, but by people everywhere in the world. Other than country and military leaders, who achieves that kind of recognition 100 years after their death? That status, that renown. Why Houdini? We remember the man. He stood 5 foot 5 inches tall, weighed about 170 pounds, had spent his career escaping from a limitless number of challenges, from chains, handcuffs and leg irons, straitjackets, milk cans, jails, locked boxes, sealed, nailed closed boxes and coffins, and even from death-defying situations, such as hanging upside down on the flagpole of a building to escape from a straitjacket, or being thrown into icy rivers, until he finally encountered one limit from which there was no escape. But he was a masterful escape artist. And much more than that. To begin with, he wasn't born Harry Houdini. He created Harry Houdini. He was born Eric Weiss in Budapest in 1874. His family came to America when he was a child, and he grew up in Appleton, Wisconsin, and then Milwaukee, and then New York City. And then he created Harry Houdini. The name was manufactured from the great French magician, Jean-Eugène Robert Houdin. Houdin, the father, today thought of as the father of modern magic. He took the name Houdin and added an I. He gave an Americanized nod to the first name. His childhood nickname was Eric, and so he became Harry Houdini, Harry Houdini. He built his identity as deliberately as he built any escape. And Houdini lived many lives all at once. First, Houdini was a magician and an escape artist. He did tricks, coin and card tricks. Famous poster of him from 1898 called King of Cards. He was an escape artist from those shackles, ropes, straitjackets, milk cans, packing boxes, and so forth. an illusionist with and without his wife. He did the water torture cell, a metamorphosis, even a vanishing elephant in the Hippodrome in New York City, and a trick near the end of his life called Buried Alive. I want to show you the one Houdini artifact I have. I'm not a Houdini collector, but I do have one Houdini piece. It's right here. It's a broadside from Cardiff in Wales at the Empire Theatre. And it shows, this is from 1911. It shows the performers that were there, and of course featuring at the top Houdini himself. Today we would say Houdini in person. Second, Houdini the inventor. He invented all kinds of magic gimmicks, particularly for his escapes. Hidden hinge releases, foot-controlled rope severing mechanism, unlocking and locking mechanisms. In 1921, he registered a patent, one of his two. The patent was for a quick-release diving helmet. Remember those giant diving suits they had back then? This was for an emergency escape from one of those. And in 1926, in September, a month before he died, he patented a, well, I'll come back to that. Third, Houdini the magic leader. He was president of the SAM until he resigned in 1908 in controversy, but then rejoined and was president from 1917 to 1926 till his death. Houdini the author. He wrote 12 books, including one novel, 11 short stories, 3 plays. He made up scrapbooks for his time exposing spiritualists and also from his own history. And he kept a diary every year of his performing life. Fifth, Houdini the reporter, editor, publisher. He owned, from 1906 to 1908, Conjurer's Magazine. Sixth, Houdini the pen pal. He was, I can tell you, a prolific correspondent. Well, he had 2 secretaries that traveled with him, and carbon paper, and typewriters. There are Houdini letters everywhere. You can find them at auctions and buy them for your collection if you are inclined to spend the money. The content of those letters determines usually their value. He wrote regularly to Harry Keller, and Keller back to him, to Frederick Eugene Powell, to dealers like Floyd Thayer, and for 15 years during their friendship, Chung-Ling Soo, Billy Robinson, and to even Arthur Conan Doyle, who was a friend of his, the creator of Sherlock Holmes, until they had a falling out over the belief in spiritualism. Number 7, Houdini the collector. He was a big collector. He collected information. He didn't have a formal education. It was limited. But he became intensely self-educated. He read. He researched. Some of his articles were researched and presented in Conjurer's Magazine. He wrote many of the articles there. He built a formidable library. So big was his book collection that at least 2 collectors, David Copperfield and Bruce Averbook in Cleveland, claim to own Houdini's library. They certainly own a substantial amount of it. It's true. But so does the Ransom Center at the University of Texas, where I told you a couple of months ago, I spent 3 days, 3 months ago, and I encourage you all to do the same thing. They're very generous in sharing, and you can read the letters I spoke of, but you can also see the books. In fact, next month, beginning at the end of next month, there's a Houdini display from their collection that includes a library full of books, or it looks like it for most of us, but just one of those libraries, plus magic posters and significant letters that are on display and other artifacts. There's also a great collection of Houdini books at the Library of Congress, also available at request to see. Not as easy to make requests there as it is at the ransom. Speaking of the Library of Congress, in 1925, there's a letter they have where Houdini discusses his extensive collection of letters and documents and books relating to spiritualism. It's important because Houdini's later campaign against spiritualists wasn't simply by somebody saying, "I don't believe in ghosts." Number 8, Houdini, the aviation pioneer. Houdini, the Wright brothers first flew in 1903. In 1910, Houdini bought a French Voisin biplane, had it taken apart and shipped to Australia, where he was doing his next tour. It was reassembled, and he completed the first successful controlled power flight in Australia on March 18th, 1910. You better believe that helped promote his tour through Australia. Number 9, Houdini, the film star. He was in 8 movies and TV and movie series, many of whom he co-produced. In one of those movies, in 1919, The Master Mystery, the first robot in a motion picture appeared. Houdini called it Q. John Gone has recreated that robot, and it's been presented a number of times at magic collectors events over the last few years. Houdini, the philanthropist, number 10. In Magic History Moment number 68, I'm sure you all remember, about Washington Irving Bishop. It's my favorite title of any of these Magic History Moments. It was the autopsy that killed him, because Washington Irving Bishop had epilepsy, was misdiagnosed by a couple of doctors who then autopsied him, which is when he died. His mother, a wealthy woman, Bishop's mother, for the rest of her life pursued justice against those doctors. Never managed to succeed. But after she had pretty much run through all her money, Houdini paid for a house for her to live in until she passed away. In fact, he helped a number of retired performers as well as some that were down on their luck, often very quietly. Houdini, the public relations expert, an early and adept self-publicist, was Houdini. Today we live in a time of social media, viral videos, personal branding, influencers. Houdini would have understood all of it. Most magicians do a trick and then move on to the next one. Not Houdini. He didn't just create attention to his performances, he made them into events. He crafted and promoted them to the degree that he could, and he, to the degree that he could, controlled the story. He contacted the press and photographers, the MCs and producers. For example, he insisted that all of his escapes be presented seriously, not with comedy, but seriously. He worked with the police and other organizations to do his performances, and that gave each one of them importance. He not only had secretaries, he had an advance man who would go to the cities that he was going to visit next and scope out the press, meet with reporters, meet the key leaders, scope out the dramatic locations, maybe for an escape that he would perform publicly, and meet with anyone who presented an opportunity for Houdini to get more attention. And if a stunt could be made larger, more dangerous, and more visually spectacular, Houdini generally made it larger, more dangerous, and more spectacular. Houdini's most famous quote regarding the psychology of his stunts is, quote, "The easiest way to attract a crowd is to let it be known that at a given time and a given place, someone is going to attempt something that in the event of failure will mean sudden death, unquote. Houdini's genius was figuring out how to make himself impossible to ignore. And then there were the challenges. Houdini would invite police officers and prisons and even carpentry shops that made things like coffins or packing boxes to challenge him with their handcuffs or nail him into a packing box that they would construct. And all this was well promoted through what are known as challenges. We've got a couple of them here. These are photocopies. They look like this. They were flyers, inexpensive publicity, if well distributed. This one is a challenge where they're going to seal them in a box in 1920 and under the condition that the box must not be airtight. And when Houdini escaped, he made the police and the carpenters and anyone else involved heroes in the Houdini story. He didn't get the better of them exactly, even though he always succeeded in escaping, but he made them part of his act. What was important about these challenges was not that he escaped, but that he escaped something that was unbeatable, unescapable. That's what made the story. So when Houdini turned to policemen and had these escapes from their shackles, the newspaper headline wrote itself: Houdini escapes from police handcuffs. He understood the news cycle even before there was a news cycle. 12. Houdini, the investigator and exposer of fraudulent spiritualists and mediums. Can the dead speak to the living? Houdini studied techniques of the spiritualists and the mediums. He collected the literature. He learned their methods. He was not merely skeptical, he was forensically skeptical. Houdini toured the United States exposing the methods of fraudulent spiritual mediums. His lectures included a slideshow, demonstrations of seance techniques, and exposures of specific mediums. There was a deeply personal reason why he did this. Houdini adored his mother. And after she died in 1913, he desperately wanted to believe that he could somehow communicate with her. And Houdini wasn't the only one that wished it. After World War I, grieving families, desperate to reach sons and husbands lost in the war, filled the pockets of mediums who claimed to channel voices from beyond. People wanted desperately to believe that death was not the end. Houdini understood that emotional need. He understood illusion, misdirection, and stage performance in an industry of professional con artists preying on grief. Mediums claimed they could communicate with the dead. They produced mysterious voices, floating objects, spirit photographs, writings supposedly by ghosts, tables that moved, trumpets that floated through darkened rooms. Houdini wrote about them and attended their seances in disguise, and then publicly exposed their mechanical tricks, the hidden wires, the sliding panels, the concealed noisemakers. 13, Houdini, the political activist. He took his campaign to Washington. He testified before Congress in an effort to restrict fortune-telling in the District of Columbia. And it made national news and international news. Why? Because Houdini believed that there was an ethical difference between when a magician says, "I am fooling you," and a medium says, your dead mother is talking to you. Or later, for Bess Houdini, your dead husband is talking to you. Which takes us to 1926, 100 years ago. In 1926, Houdini was 52 years old and still traveling, still performing, and inventing. There's one of the things he patented besides the helmet. Let me show it to you. Well, let me show you first the patent. The patent that he registered, again, a month before his death. It was for a doll that would escape from a straitjacket. That's the copy from the patent of the doll that he created. And that's the patent as recorded. And our friend Mike Martin has, with his 3D printer, made this doll. Would you like to see it? But no. Hey. Here it is. It's got a flat head because the idea is that the doll turns upside down, stands on its head, and wriggles and shakes loose the straitjacket. Just a month before his death, he created a toy. Because I think you may remember Magic History Moment number 100 when I talked about Carlton, the human hairpin, who made his own merchandise. He made a statue, which I showed, and I told you about an ashtray that he made where it was a card fan where you could lay the cigarettes that he sold in his shows. Well, Houdini may have been thinking the same way to do some merchandising and making those toys, which he would certainly have sold. In addition, in September of 1926, 100 years ago next month, Houdini was planning and rehearsing a new illusion called Buried Alive. The posters are still around. In fact, there's quite a lot of them because not being promoted, they were not used. Houdini actually performed a version of it, and it's described as him laying in a coffin with a glass front and lowered into a vault and covered with a ton of sand. Apparently, he liked the illusion very much. That was September. Then came October. Houdini touted his ability to withstand blows to the abdomen as long as he got set. On October 22nd, a student at McGill University in Montreal punched him in the stomach before he got set. Now, Houdini was already feeling unwell. He'd been experiencing symptoms of appendicitis, but Houdini continued performing. He traveled. He went on with the show. A week later in Detroit, he was rushed to Grace Hospital, where he died on Halloween. That single fact guaranteed that his death would become mythology. It was worldwide news, and what followed were rumors. There were conspiracy theories. Imagine that. There were claims that spiritualists had somehow caused his death. There were suggestions that he had been murdered. There were even later attempts to investigate whether he might have been poisoned. But the reality was a much less theatrical explanation. A ruptured appendix, peritonitis, sepsis, death. At 1:26 p.m. on October 31st, 1926. The man who had spent his career escaping from death died on the one day of the year when the dead supposedly walk amongst us. So Houdini the legend immediately became larger than life and death. Houdini and his wife, Bess, had an agreement established years before. If Houdini died first, discovered that there really was a way to communicate from beyond the grave, he would attempt to send Bess a secret message in a seance. Among Houdini historians, there are three versions of what that code was. Here they are. The word Mike, a private name Houdini used for Bess. The second, from their Second Sight Act, a code phrase. Rosabelle, answer. Tell, pray, answer. Look, tell, answer, answer, tell, which meant believe. And the third and most common in this lore was the phrase, Rosabelle, believe. For 10 years after his death, Bess Houdini participated in seances intended to contact her husband. No convincing message came. Finally, after 10 years, her seances stopped. She said, probably in humor, 10 years is long enough to wait for any man. So 100 years after his death, what should we remember? Remember the escapes, of course. Remember the man behind them, the performer who turned handcuffs into headlines, the obsessive collector of books and documents, the investigator who studied spiritualism and so thoroughly that he could reproduce their miracles, the inventor who patented devices and even designed a Houdini toy, the showman who understood publicity before the terms PR and branding became well-known businesses. His boyhood in the 1870s and 80s was a turbulent, transformative period marked by the end of Reconstruction, a major financial collapse, the 1873 panic that triggered a long depression, caused widespread bank failures, factory closures, and labor strikes. Ironically, historians have called it the Gilded Age, defined by stark contrast between immense new wealth and deep social conflict. Here in Houdini was one invisible immigrant, a poor boy from nowhere, an immigrant boy determined to better himself through, well, what qualities can we describe, can we attribute to him? Persistence, fearlessness, spine, force of personality, much more. As I said, throughout history, who does the world remember a century later, after they're gone? For obvious reasons, country and military leaders. But who else? Well, 100 years after his death, we remember Harry Houdini. Around the world, people see his name, and they know him, or at least the reference. In another 100 years, I suspect he'll still be widely known. Houdini, a man, like few others, escaped invisibility. Remembered, not forgotten. That is history. And that is Magic History Moment number 122.